After Shu Takumi and his small team finished the first Ace Attorney game in a grueling 10 months, which was technically 3 months behind schedule, he took a well-deserved extended vacation. The day he got back from vacation, his boss told him that Capcom was interested in making his game into a trilogy. There was just one teeny tiny catch. They wanted him to write up a complete script for the next game in just 3.5 months. And could he please make this one 5 scenarios long instead of 4 this time? Takumi thought this was completely impossible. It had taken him more than a month to write each scenario for the previous game, and he didn't have any leftover case ideas, so he'd be starting over from scratch. He immediately resolved to put his foot down and let them know that this schedule was absolutely unreasonable. So after promising to try his best to meet the deadline, Takumi buckled down and got to work on what was possibly the most difficult development stage of the entire Ace Attorney series. Being a more organized person than I am, Takumi broke down what he needed to write and how much time he had to write it. He ended up with 1 week to come up with a plot outline for each case and half a month to write the complete dialogue. With 3.5 months of intense toil and sheer force of will, Takumi somehow made his impossible deadline. To help you understand the scope of this, Takumi's writing from these 3.5 months was 1,500 pages long. Think about that the next time you're struggling to sit down and write something in that novel you've had on the back burner for years. Despite his nearly superhuman writing feat, Takumi's work on Justice for All's script was still far from finished. When Takumi went with his bosses again, he was told to introduce a new mechanic to the game. The mechanic Takumi came up with was the Psyche Lock System, a supernatural lie detector combined with a sort of mini puzzle game where evidence can be presented to break each lock, and the person being questioned will reveal the truth once the last lock breaks. Takumi thought up this mechanic almost immediately, but told his boss to give him 3 days to come up with something, probably in case he was given another insane deadline. The Psyche Lock mechanic had to be written into the script, so that required some rewrites. While all of this was being done, the first game hit shelves in Japan, and as audiences reacted to it, another issue arose. Miles Edgeworth was, much to Takumi's surprise, an extremely popular character. Takumi had written Edgeworth to be the main prosecutor of the second game again. That meant that Edgeworth would be losing a lot of cases to Phoenix, which Takumi felt undermined his credibility and skill as a prosecutor. So he decided to replace Edgeworth for most of the game with a new character, Franziska von Karma. This required more extensive rewrites. After that, it was finally time to start programming the game. For returning characters and locations, Takumi and his team used the old sprite and pixel art from the first game. According to Takumi, this was so that players would feel like the trilogy was all one continuous story, but I doubt it hurt that reusing assets also saved the team a lot of work and time. Before production was complete, the team hit one other snag. They couldn't get 5 cases to fit onto the cartridge. So after everything Takumi went through to get 5 scripts written on time, they ended up having to remove one from the final game. Fortunately, Takumi's writing efforts weren't wasted though, and the removed case ended up becoming case 3 of the third game, Trials and Tribulations. The team struggled to get 5 cases to fit on that cartridge is a story for another day. After this crazy scramble of deadlines and alterations, Phoenix Wright, Justice for All, was finally completed and released to the general public in Japan on October 18, 2002, just over a year after the release of the first game. So how did the game turn out? Well, that is, of course, a matter of opinion. The general consensus among the Ace Attorney fandom seems to be that Justice for All is a solid game, but overall the weakest and most uneven of the original trilogy. It has a case that many people consider to be the best in the series, but it also has a case that many consider one of the worst. Justice for All also isn't helped by the fact that compared to the rest of the games in the series, it's a bit light on content. After Justice for All, 5 cases became the new standard for Ace Attorney games, and even the first game eventually got a 5th case when it was re-released. So Justice for All is now the shortest game in the series, the only game with only 4 cases. On top of that, after this, the games would start having larger interconnected story arcs that spanned multiple cases. So Justice for All and the first game are the only ones where there's no larger story arc that builds throughout the games and pays off in the final case. And even the first game kinda has a larger arc with the connections between the second and fourth cases. So Justice for All is the smallest game in the series and has the least cohesive storyline. That's not really the game's fault, it's the result of changes to the series that came afterwards. But let's get to what really matters, my opinion. I'm not going to review the whole game in one video because all 4 cases are actually pretty distinct from each other and vary in quality. So for this intro video, I'm just going to include case 1, the Lost Turnabout. The case opens with a dream sequence where Phoenix cowers in fear from a giant spectral version of the Judge. Takumi said that this opening was inspired by Devil May Cry, and instead of the Judge, this dream was going to have an actual freaking demon. In my not-so-humble opinion, it's good that they went with the Judge. I think it fits the themes of Justice for All a lot better, particularly the final case of the game. And while I could see there being arguments that a fricking demon is appropriate in the setting, personally I think it kinda clashes. After that, we're treated to a court lobby scene of Phoenix getting bonked on the head with a fire extinguisher and forgetting not only about the trial he's about to defend in, but everything about who he is. Yeah, it's the old Hollywood amnesia cliche, where someone gets bonked on the head and forgets who they are. Needless to say, this isn't actually how amnesia works. You see, in the first game, the tutorial for how to play had been worked into the dialogue of the first case. This had been well received, and Takumi wanted to do it again, but he thought Phoenix having to be told how to present evidence and look at a case file again would seem unbelievable. So he decided to have Phoenix get amnesia, so everything had to be explained to him again. Later games in the series have a different newbie lawyer character take over for each first case, or in one case, an old lawyer character in a new country with weird laws. These approaches are much less distracting to the overall story. The amnesia plot device, on the other hand, is a lot more distracting. It's so obviously an excuse for Phoenix to need a tutorial again, especially with how it's neatly resolved at the end of the case with no consequences. The Ace Attorney series has used amnesia plot devices several times after this, and those times had a bit more emotional weight. It's a little hokey, a little soap opera-y, but the series is very consistent about this. You just kind of have to accept that in the Ace Attorney world, if someone suffers from some kind of serious head trauma, they're likely to forget who they are until some special key memory unlocks everything. As for the rest of the case, it's fine. Solving it is pretty straightforward. The defendant, Maggie Bird, is a likable character who I didn't want to get convicted, and she becomes a recurring supporting character in some later cases. The real killer is a typical slime ball, but his design isn't as good or memorable as Frank saw it from the first game. His breakdown is kinda creepy because it's so weird. The case has its fair share of funny gags and charming lines, but overall, it's one of the most meh opening cases in the series. Like the game it's in, Lost Turnabout isn't helped by how the series changed. Starting in the third game, opening cases started having higher stakes with more personal consequences to thrill and hook players right out of the gate. The first 2 games focused more on keeping opening cases very simple and self-contained. Again, that doesn't make them bad, but there just aren't as many memorable or exciting moments. Because of this, the Lost Turnabout is a case I often forget about, and when I do remember, I usually just remember it as the case where Phoenix gets amnesia, which isn't handled particularly well, sometimes is the case that introduces Maggie Bird. Other than that, it's pretty forgettable.
That's what you call ironic.
So overall, not the most exciting beginning to Ace Attorney 2. The next case, however, includes one of the most influential expansions of Ace Attorney lore in the franchise, taking the whole series in a direction less based in the real world and more into the realm of alternate history and the supernatural. The influence would affect the plot of entire games in the future, and possibly the whole tone of the series, and they would become a major element of what makes the Ace Attorney franchise unique from the courtroom dramas and detective shows that inspired it. But that's for the next video. If you like this one, be sure to leave a like and subscribe and click the bell notification to see more. You can also subscribe to my backup channels on Odysee and Bitchute below, as well as check out my webcomic, The Last Night of Elder, which now has finished Chapter 1. Leave a comment down below if you have any thoughts of your own on the game or the case. Thank you very much for watching and have a great day.